John Calvin on Psalm 23, verse 5. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. My cup overflows. David, by his own example, admonishes the rich of their duty, that they may be the more ardent in the expression of their gratitude to God, the more delicately he feeds them. Farther, let us remember that those who have greater abundance than others are bound to observe moderation not less than if they had only as much of the food things of this life as would serve for their limited and temperate enjoyment. We are too much inclined by nature to excess, and therefore, when God is, in respect of worldly things, bountiful to his people, it is not to stir up and nourish them in this disease. All men ought to attend to the rule of Paul, which is laid down in Philippians 4, verse 12, that they, quote, may know both how to be abased and how to abound, unquote. That want may not sink us into despondency. We need to be sustained by patient endurance, and on the other hand, that too great abundance may not elate us above measure. We need to be restrained by the bridle of temperance. Accordingly, the Lord, when he enriches his own people, restrains at the same time the licentious desire of the flesh by the spirit of continence, so that, of their own accord, they prescribe to themselves rules of temperance. Not that it is unlawful for rich men to enjoy more freely the abundance which they possess than if God had given them a smaller portion, but all men ought to beware, and much more kings, lest they should be dissolved in voluptuous pleasure. David, no doubt, as was perfectly lawful, allowed himself larger scope than if he had been only one of the common people, or than if he had still dwelt in his father's cottage. But he so regulated himself in the midst of his delicacies as not at all to take pleasure in stuffing and fattening the body. He knew well how to distinguish between the table which God had prepared for him and a trough for swine. It is also worthy of particular notice that although David lived upon his own lands, the tribute money and other revenues of the kingdom, he gave thanks to God just as if God had daily given him his food with his own hand. From this we conclude that he was not blinded with his riches, but always looked upon God as his householder who brought forth meat and drink from his own store and distributed it to him at the proper season.